Welcome to a Champion's Journey podcast. I'm Matt Davidson. From an early age, I've had the privilege of learning from world champions and world-class performers, and I've always been fascinated by what drives them to the pinnacle of achievement. In this podcast, I'll interview high performers to learn more about the habits, rituals, tactics, and strategies which have aided them throughout the course of their journeys so that we can take those lessons and apply them to ours. The mission of a Champion's Journey podcast is to interview not only those who have stood on the top podium in arenas of high-level competition, but to learn from those who have conquered life's greatest challenges and have dared to live life on their own terms. Shaun, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and have a conversation with me today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm humbled to be on here, so thank you.
I'm excited to share your story as Memorial Day approaches to highlight the incredible endurance challenge you're taking on to honor those who've made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms and way of life. I'm also really interested as to what drives and motivates you to push yourself to the degree and level that you do on a daily basis. So we'll get into your backstory.
Sure.
Where did you grow up and what was your upbringing like?
So I grew up in upstate New York, outside of Rochester. I had a very normal childhood. Nothing too crazy happened. Before I get into that, let me kind of lay down a foundational piece if I could for a second. So, and this is kind of important because it'll probably weave itself in and out of this conversation. So, when I was young, I'm going to keep leaning forward and back. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I move a lot. My hands move a lot too. So I'm half Italian, but anyways, so when I was young, I realized at an early age that, at least this was the story I told myself. I realized that I didn't really have any identifiable natural talents. I wasn't really extremely good at anything. I was kind of just average for the most part, like physically. I mean, maybe I was a little bit, slightly above average intelligence wise, but then in other things I wasn't so much. So, but I kind of realized that, I knew that if I wanted to be successful in anything in life, I would have to work extremely hard and have a high amount of discipline because, I identified that those were the things that I could control. So, and obviously, the name of your podcast is A Champion's Journey. Well, the thing that's really interesting and really important for most people is most people aren't going to have like super genetics or maybe super intelligence to get at a world-class elite level in a very specific thing. But everybody has the potential to be world-class at effort, discipline, perseverance, right? So, because those are all things that we all can actually control. So again, I learned that at an early age and it kind of stayed with me. And whether or not it's true, it doesn't matter. I think it's really important to have that. So, so yeah, that's kind of a foundational piece to kind of where my overall mindset came from and where it's been pretty much my entire life.
Was that fostered by your parents or is that something that you decided on your own?
I don't know where it came from, where it developed. I mean, I'm not sure why, but I've always been relatively self-aware. Like I always paid attention to what I was thinking and what I was doing. And I always try to be really honest with myself, which is what self-awareness is, right? So I think I was just hyper aware of where I was. And then I kind of realized that, just being honest with yourself about that, it allowed me to realize, hey, there's a lot of things I can't control, but there's a lot of things I can control. So I really need to focus on the things I can control. And I can control discipline, effort, perseverance, hard work, all that stuff. Anybody can be world-class at those things. So
did you apply that to your education, for example, or to physical training from an early age?
Not really. I didn't really get into working out till I was about 15 or 16. And we were somewhat active. I mean, I was a normal kid, so you played outside and whatnot. But really, so again, a relatively normal childhood, nothing too crazy. We kind of grew up lower middle class. Didn't have a lot of extra money, but we survived. And I think an important thing is, and I think this is a thing that most people feel when you're a kid and teenager, it's always awkward, right? Like everybody goes through that. You've got hormones, you've got just a lot of emotions, very strong emotions. They're tough years. And for me, again, like most people, I'm sure, there was a lot of self-doubt. There was a total lack of self-confidence. You just don't know who you are yet, right? But again, kind of going back to that self-awareness, I knew that about myself and I recognized that. So I was like, oh, and this is the other piece. I'm a very positive person and a very realistic person. You kind of have to be in business. But so when I do have negative emotions, I don't know why, but they affect me very strongly. So like I really feel them and they're really painful to me psychologically. So like those negative emotions of self-doubt and like lack of self-confidence, they were really painful to me and I didn't want to feel that pain anymore. So I was able to identify, okay, this is where I am right now. And I didn't like that person. And that's not like, it's not self-loathing. I didn't hate myself. It was a recognition, an honest assessment of, hey, I don't like who I am right now, but since I control my life, I'm responsible for my life, I have the power to change my life eventually. So
it goes back to that self-awareness,
yes.
About something that you want to change about yourself. You're aware enough that you don't like this certain aspect of yourself and you're going to change that for the better. So like for myself, for example, I was a small kid. I wasn't very athletically gifted. And I think working out gave me that outlet to try to improve myself, those weaknesses that I saw in myself.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. So it was like, it's like standing on the bank of a river and you see yourself, the person you want to become on the other side. You have no idea how you're going to cross that river. No idea, right? But like, you know that you need to, you're just not sure how. And that'll tie into the military later, but that's kind of, the military was the bridge that I used to get across there.
Okay. Yeah. So, throughout your life, you've had several of those rivers that I've been able to find out from the outside of your story. And, I'm looking forward to learning more and about how you built those bridges to cross those rivers. So were you a good student in school?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, because I hated feeling bad. So I always at least tried to do good. So, I'm always a person who's running from something. So I'm running from feeling bad. I'm not chasing feeling good. I'm running from feeling bad. Right. So, and that's a huge motivator. But yeah, no, I did decent in school and actually, I really dislike school. I love learning stuff. But I hated formal education. So thankfully I was able to take the right electives and, I was able to actually skip 11th grade and graduate a year early from high school. So, and my birthday was in the summer. So I actually graduated high school when I was 16. And then the parents say, of course, hey, you're done with high school. What are you going to do? I had no idea at this point. Right. Just like most kids, teenagers, like you're kind of clueless and lost. Right. But they said, well, you're done with high school. So you're either going to pay rent, go to college or move out. Like, guess I'll go to college. So thank you. Yes, I have to do something. Right. So I started going to college and so I was 17. I turned 17 over that summer. This is 1998. And then I started college in that fall semester. And then I don't know what happened. I can't remember if I like watched something on TV, like a documentary or read something, but it just hit me that I needed to join the military. It was, and I can't remember, but it was like this really powerful urge that this is what I needed to do. And it was like, and that was, like I said, that was the bridge that would take me from here to where I needed to be.
What college did you go to, and when did you graduate?
It was a community college in Monroe County in Rochester, New York. I went there for a year and a half, and then I switched my majors, and then I graduated from SUNY Brockport in Western New York. So I started in, again, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So my initial major was electrical engineering technology. I had some interest in electronics, but I had to pick something, right? So I started there, and then like the military idea came, and every semester after that semester, I wanted to quit college and go enlist. And thankfully, my dad's like, Shaun, don't do that. Like, it's going to be, you're young, finish college. You've got plenty of time. But, so thankfully I heeded his advice. I stayed in and I finished. And I even did 10 weeks of, ROTC, cause I wanted to kind of test the waters, and, officer life was not for me. No knock on them. The people there when I was there, and no knock on officers whatsoever, but it just wasn't for me. So
did you find that that ROTC experience helped you to prepare somewhat though for the military?
Yeah, a little more exposure to kind of just what military life would be like. So yeah, I think so, definitely. Yeah,
like things like basic drill and ceremonies, exactly, and the leadership structure and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Just want to go back a little bit. Did you have any kind of, did you play any organized sports in high school?
No, I skateboarded and played the guitar, and that's about it. So yeah. When I was younger, I played baseball, but yeah, nothing really organized or nothing in high school.
Okay. So getting back to when you made your transition from college to the military. So you're saying you think you saw it in a commercial or something. You graduated college. I just want to make sure we're getting the timeline correct here, just for my general purposes. You graduated from college prior to 9/11, I take it?
Actually, my last semester was when 9/11 happened.
Okay. Do you think that motivated you any more to want to join the military?
No, it was like I was already 100% in.
Okay.
And I already knew what I wanted to do in the military. So it was like, okay, this just happened. This just got real, right? So it was more of also there was, I'm sure there was a little bit of fear of missing out, right? You want to get in on the fight. So
right, there was a lot of patriotism at that time. Yeah. People were flying flags all over the place. Sure. And it really kind of bound us together as a country.
And obviously we had no idea how long it was going to last. Or we didn't know it was going to be the perpetual war that it's turned into, right? So, but yeah, so that happened like a couple weeks into my last semester in college. And then, so that happened. Obviously I finished, graduated, and then I didn't end up enlisting until June of the following year because I promised my sister that I'd go to her wedding. She was getting married in like May or June. So, but anyways, so, during this time, obviously I'm doing college, but I'm also looking into the military, figuring out, like, learning more, reading more, working out, getting myself mentally, physically prepared. One of my biggest fears is being unprepared, so I'm always over preparing for everything. So
what was your chosen military career path, and how did you prepare for that?
Well, I knew I wanted to do special operations, so I wanted to get in. So I was obviously like reading a lot of stuff, books or stuff online about Rangers, Special Forces, any type of special operations unit, right?
Were there any particular books that you can suggest to people out there that are looking to follow the same path?
There's so many more now, right? Like there's so many more now. But back then, what was I reading back then? It was a long time ago, Matt.
yeah, no worries. Didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I was just wondering if there was any book that stuck out in your head that you were like, yeah, this is what really fires me up.
Man, I think they all did, right? Yeah. Like, and there weren't as many as there are now, but like there was a lot of like Vietnam books. A decent amount of Green Berets and Vietnam books. And it was like, those were really fascinating and interesting to me. Sounded terrible, but it was still fascinating, right? But like, so I had already kind of mentally figured out that that's the overall direction I wanted to go. And there was a bit of serendipity that happened. So I was on these online forums, and I knew, like, doing my research, my own research before actually enlisting, that, hey, you can't go straight into SF. I wanted to go there, but I knew I couldn't actually do that, at least at that time. And then while I was kind of looking at some of these forums and whatnot online, I came across this posting that the 18 X-ray program opened back up. I'm like, what is this? So, and the 18 X-ray program is SF recruits people right off the street. You go right into the pipeline, and there's not the previous 2 years time and service requirement before you can go to selection. So you get to do, you don't have to spend a couple years in the regular Army. You can go right to SF. So,
and what is that pipeline? Just briefly for the people that might be interested in going that route.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot, but like all the order of things have changed over the year. But in a nutshell, you've got to do infantry basic training and AIT. I'm not sure what AIT is called now, but
advanced individual training.
Is it
but
still called that?
It's the same thing,
idea.
I believe. Yeah.
So you do that at Fort Benning Airborne School, and then you come up to Bragg or Liberty now, I guess. And we had, I think they still have this. We had SOPSI, which was Special Operations Preparation and Conditioning course. And that was to get you ready to go to SF selection. Then you go to SF selection, you come back, and we had a second SOPSI, and that was to get you ready for the small unit tactics phase. Again, I'm not sure if that's still around. And that was like a mini ranger school, right? Okay. So you did that, and then you did your MOS training. Mine was an engineer initially, and then later on I became a Fox, which was Intel. And then after that, you did Robin Sage, the huge culmination exercise. And then you went to language school, and we finished with SEER school. And after those 6 phases, you graduated, you got your beret and tab and all that stuff, and you went to your group.
Just curious, what language did you go
Spanish.
with? Nice.
So we were actually, our SOPSI class, it was one of the first ones. It was very early on. We got very lucky because our head cadre, I don't know, he liked us all, and he was a really cool guy, a really good example for us. And he got everybody their first request for MOS and group. And it was just like, my ASVAB was decent. I probably should have been a commo or medic, but I got engineer, which is what I wanted. So we all got pretty lucky with that, I would say. So, but yeah, so 9/11 happened. I graduate. So this is, I'm going to kind of segue into a somewhat interesting story. At least I think it's interesting. So
yeah, please.
So I go to the recruiter. I'm like, hey, there's this 18 X-ray program. I'd like to enlist. He's like, no, there's not. This doesn't exist. I'm like, yes, it does. Right. So, so I went back to my house. I found the online thing. I printed it out. I brought it in. He's like, oh, okay, this is awesome. Great. We can do this. Right. He was excited because I was the first person in that area to actually sign up for that contract. So, you do the normal thing. I went on the, what is it called? The delayed entry program, DEP. Because I was, like I said, I was waiting to go in until June. So, I did the contract. We figured that stuff out. I did took my ASVAB, D-Lab for the language to make sure, I could learn a language. And then, so everything was in place. And then at some point, probably February, I think, of 2002, I had to go to MEPS. I think it was called MEPS. And you had to go and do your physical, right?
Yeah, it's physical and all of your basic in processing.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yep, yes. So again, this is just a formality. Like, my testing is done, everything's in place. I've got no physical issues, everything is fine. Not a big deal, right? Not worried about it. So I go there, and again, everything's going fine until until I get to the color vision test. So there's these, for those who have not taken it, it's called the pseudo-isochromatic Ishihara plate test. And I know this for a very specific reason. So I get to these I'm sure you've taken these, right? So obviously, because you jump a lot, so you need to pass that physical. But I get to this test, and I've never seen this before. And like, there's these cards with all these little different colored dots and these different shade variations, and there's like a number that you can kind of make out within the cards. I'm like, hey, these are kind of hard to make out. So I take the test. I didn't really feel good about it. I only got 7 out of 14, I believe, which was, I think you needed 10 or 11 to pass. I'm like, this is strange, right? Because like, of course I'm thinking to myself, why is this test so hard? I know I'm not colorblind. Like, I know what black and white is, and I know what color is, right? Like I'm obviously not colorblind. What's going on? So then they're like, oh, don't worry about it. You can take a red green light test. I'm like, okay, cool. I go to take that. I fail it. So I think I was overthinking it because like I have a slight stigmatism, right? So like the white and the green was kind of blending in when it was, I don't know what the reason was, but like I could drive, and I've been driving for years at this point, and like red, green, yellow, I can tell the difference, right? So, and I understand why it's necessary, obviously, for airborne operations. But so anyways, I failed that, and I'm like, okay, what now, right? So I finish up the stuff there. My recruiter who drove me up there, he's like, Shaun, we got a problem. I mean, you failed the color test. I can't give you this contract anymore. Like, you don't qualify for it.
Did your heart sink at that moment?
Yeah. Like that was I think we've all had these situations in life where like, again, like this was my bridge to the person I wanted to become. And now it just completely came crashing down around me. Right. And like, we've all had those moments where you've got kind of your life planned out. Like you've got a clear vision. You're excited about it. And then all of a sudden life's like, whoa, hold on, wait a minute. Not so fast, right?
Yeah. And in that moment, time seems to slow down too.
Really, yes. Yeah. It always has a way of doing that, right? It always sneaks in there and kicks your ass sometimes. Yeah. So yes, I was sad. I was angry. I was frustrated. I was confused because I was like, again, like I can see colors, like, right? So anyways, I'm trying to process it. I'm not somebody who kind of sits around and dwells on things. So,
you definitely seem to be a man of action for sure. So what action did you take to try to correct that or figure a way around it?
Yeah. So it was, first of all, it was not accepting that was the answer, right? Or not accepting that was how things were going to be. So I had to figure out what happened first. Like the first step to solving a problem is kind of gathering intel and like, okay, how did this happen? Let me understand this so I can try to correct it, right? Gather as much information as possible. So, immediately the next day I'm online, and obviously the internet existed back then, but it wasn't as robust, right? Not as much information was on there, but I started doing some research. I found out about 10% of men have a color deficiency, where they're just like some to varying degrees, right? Where some of the shade variations are hard to, like you can see them all, but like they kind of blend together when you're looking at something larger. So some of those numbers, like maybe in one of those plate tests, you would see a 9 instead of a 7, right? Okay. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I understand that. But again, I'm not colorblind. So how do I figure this out? So I'm not sure where this idea came from, but the recruiter must have mentioned something about a waiver, because I probably wouldn't have thought of that on my own. But maybe he probably said something to the effect of the only way you can get in now is by a waiver. So I'm like, okay, well, how can I get a waiver? So I came up with a plan, and the plan was and in that process of kind of like trying to figure out what I had, I was also like trying to figure out what that test was, right? So I started looking at those, and I realized early on, after kind of looking at things for a couple hours, I realized if I stared at one of these cards long enough, I could kind of teach my brain to actually see the right number, nice. Right? And like I could teach my brain to see the 7 instead of the 9, and like see where it started, where it ended, where I was seeing it wrong. So my plan was, okay, I'm going to go online, download as many of these cards as I possibly can find. They're just like, the images of the cards, and then I'm just going to study them. So I spent about 3 days, morning to evening, just staring at these damn cards and just tracing the numbers out in my brain. Okay, this is a 7, that's a 14, that's a 12, whatever it was, right? And I didn't want to I probably, in retrospect, I probably could have just like memorized the card, just by the kind of looking at the colors and whatever. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't know how many cards there actually were.
Right. If they varied the test at all.
There could have been 100. I had no idea because I was just downloading everything I could find. So I didn't know if there were more out there. So I knew I had to actually teach my brain and my eyes to like recognize, to force myself to only see those specific colors and not the other colors where they were trying to trick you, I guess. Right. So anyways, I did that for about 3 days. And then I got to a point where I could pull up any card in any order and kind of quickly assess it and get the accurate number. So then it was game time. So the plan was do that, see if I can do that. If I get confident enough in doing that, then I can move on and actually go to, I'm not sure if these places are still around, but like LensCrafters, Sterling Optical, eye doctor places, right?
Yeah.
So I go to the mall and I went to 4 different places like that. I said, optometrist, I'd like to take a color vision test, please. Okay, right? As long as you give me money, I don't care, right? So it's kind of a strange request, but so I went there. Obviously, I'm nervous about the first one because, I was just looking at these things online and it's different kind of in the moment in front of the doctor with him, with the actual cards, right?
Pressure's on. Yeah.
So I passed the first one. I got all of them right. And I'm like, wait, I can do this, right? So
that's a great example of creative problem solving that I'm sure kind of led you into your career path and what you're going to see later on in Special Forces. But
100%.
sorry to interrupt.
No, 100%. Yes. Definitely a lot of good lessons came from this. So I took the 3 more tests, so 4 total. I got the little slips that said, hey, Shaun passed these, whatever. I brought them into the recruiter, said, give me a waiver, please. And he got me a waiver. Nice. So that was my hurdle to get into the military. So
yeah, that's a great story. My dad had similar challenges. He was in the Special Forces as well, but he's colorblind, so he had to go through some similar creative problem solving, strategies. I think one of his was that he ended up somehow talking to the docs and convincing them to help him through at the time. But and I think that happened a couple of other times throughout his military career. But he went on to do some great things. But without that tenacity and without wanting to solve those problems and not just taking them at face value, something that might have stopped him from having an incredible career and going on and being a halo jumper and a flight surgeon, and, being in Special Forces and things of that nature. So it's just a good lesson to those that might be listening that, not just to take those things at face value. If you really want to do something, there are ways that you can work around it.
Yeah, it really, it's not over until it's over. Like, have you actually tried everything you can try? Like, can you honestly say that? If you can't, there's more to do, right? So,
What type of physical training did you do in the Army, and did it inform your approach to training now?
So I've always, I'm a smaller guy, kind of like you, right? So I've never been big. So I'm going to back up just a little bit. Yeah. So when I was growing up, it was always, there's a couple books that I'll always remember that were given to me by my father. One of them was about, it was about athletes who were endurance athletes, and like, I can't remember the name of the book, but more or less, the subject was like great accomplishments in endurance, right? So like those ideas kind of always stuck with me, and I was always not taught, but it was always impressed upon me to be. We were big baseball fans. Let me put it this way. So I used to love the Yankees, but I never liked the big, powerful home run hitters, right? I was always super impressed by Joe DiMaggio because he had that 56 game hitting streak, right? And I don't think it's been broken yet. I really don't follow baseball, but I don't think it's been broken. And that was back in the 1950s. So like those type of like not the big flashy thing, but the slow kind of consistent thing.
Right.
I always looked up to and admired and always thought that was much more important than the big flashy thing. That makes sense, right?
Right. It seems like more people can achieve that flash in the pan type of success, kind of the one-off.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more difficult to get to the top and stay there or achieve or maintain that level of achievement consistently.
Yes, exactly. And, life is an ultra endurance event. It's not a sprint, right? So like you've got to train your body and your mind for that event of life. So, but yeah, so physically, in terms of fitness, excuse me. What did I do in the military? Just normal stuff. Like I always worked extra hard at whatever we were doing in terms of physical training. So I'd always do extra running and stuff. I was never a good runner, but I did it a lot just because you needed to do that a lot. So I ran a lot and rucked a lot and stuff like that. But I wish I had gotten into CrossFit earlier because guys were doing it like in 06 and 07, but
I was about to ask.
I didn't start till later.
It.
Yeah. That wasn't until 2015. I actually started doing that. So.
And was that after you got out of the military or was it before?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I got out in 2011. So I had just under 9 years in.
So I know now or a while back, the Special Forces teams have adopted forms of functional fitness training. And I know that was kind of brought on by the whole CrossFit movement. So you didn't see any of that within the teams while you were there? There
was some. Yeah, it was starting. And we actually had our company bought a bunch of equipment for that. So, and some guys were doing it and we did some of that stuff sometimes, but it wasn't like as prevalent as it is now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What were the most valuable lessons you learned about leadership while you're in the Army?
So leadership is interesting, right? Because like you've got to lead from the front, but you also have to lead from the back. And what do I mean by that? Like you have to set an example always, and you have to be willing to kind of get in the mud too, right? Like no job is below you. And for a lot of people in leadership positions, a lot of jobs are quote unquote below them, right? You can't be like that because your people see that and then they're not going to be willing to do something if you're not willing to do it. So you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So that's really important. But then also and this has been one of the hardest things for me as a business owner is stepping back and allowing people to do their jobs I'm not talking about micromanaging them. I'm talking about like allowing people to make mistakes and allowing them and having that overall strategic vision and making sure that your people understand that and that they're executing at a tactical level, right? And so in the military, obviously the good leaders, they would step back from things and just guide people, right? And point them in the right direction and then allow them to operate, right? Because, if you're dealing with professionals, as long as you give somebody kind of clear left and right limits and the general end state, allow them to do their job, right?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have a big level of decentralized leadership,
yes.
When you're in that environment.
For sure. Now, with that, like, I think the key to that is, and this is a really hard thing for people. I know it was for me, and I think it is for everybody. People who are in the soft community, or obviously you guys, Golden Knights, operated at an extremely high level, right? World-class level. The standard is way up here, right? So after a while, you get so used to this high standard and this higher level of professionalism that when you get out and you're exposed to people who aren't at that same level, it's difficult. It's extremely difficult, right? And it's like you kind of want to tear your hair out sometimes, right?
But I'd imagine that's difficult for you to find people who are in line with your overall business vision or team
Sure.
vision or
Yeah.
whatever it is at that point in time. And if they're not, I would imagine it's extremely difficult not to it's your business and you want things run a certain way. And I would imagine if people aren't in line with that, it's just an extremely difficult and frustrating task to deal with.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's, we've talked about this before, but it's like every morning when I wake up, it's like, okay, here we go. It's going to be a fight today. I don't want it to be. Like, I don't want to fight, but it's going to be a fight because I'm dealing with so many people, and not everybody is professional. Not everybody has the same standards, and human beings are emotional, and there's a lot of psychology involved in dealing with them. Right. So yeah, like,
how do you incentivize people to fall more in line with your vision?
Well,
or your company's mission?
Yeah. It's, I think clear communication is really, really important, right? You have to give people the opportunity to be successful that you're working with. So, one of the biggest things is if you're asking a subcontractor, you're trying to get them to do something for you, you don't just ask them to do that thing. You say, hey, I need you to do this thing, and this is why it's important. And that's the key right there. Like, give people context, let them know why it's important, and then give them a time standard. I need this done by this time, this date, right? And then also give them the actual overall standard of performance, right? If you include all those things, then you're allowing that person to be more successful, right? If you kind of hold their hands and treat them like a child, they're going to act like a child, right? So having that level of clear communication with everybody is difficult. It's very difficult, but I think you get a much better result.
I find that often if you give the people the tools necessary to do the job, the tools, so to speak, of doing the job, and you're not holding their hands, then they want to do the right thing and they want to just do a good job. Is that what you found?
Yes, exactly. It's hard to do though, because it's hard in that you're dealing with so many people and things are always changing. So it's hard to constantly put out that message to people, but yes.
During your time in the Army, did you have any mentors who left a lasting impression with you?
There was a bunch of guys who, they did things that I was like, okay, this is the right way to do things. Like, but no real mentors. So I think we all find out at an early age, well, hopefully an early age, that it's probably not a good idea to have heroes, right? Because heroes always disappoint you, right? Because at some point you're going to find out something they did, and then you're going to be taken aback by that, right?
We're all human, and we all
right,
make our mistakes and have our deficiencies for sure.
So I always kind of took the perspective of looking at people, and if they had a I guess looking up to a character trait of that person or something that they did, as opposed to the whole person, right? Because then if they do something stupid that you find out about, who cares, right? Like, I'm just looking at this thing. I'm trying to copy this thing, not the
emulate
entire person.
Those traits,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. So, and really, I mean, that's what we're trying to do here as human beings, is like, you should have one hero, and that's yourself, your future self, right? Like, the person that you need to become is your hero. And that's okay. And I think that's how we should look at things. But, no, like I said, a lot of really good lessons learned from the military. And I don't think people realize, all the important things that the military, especially the soft community, instills in you. So, I mean, just attention to detail, right? Like, people don't have it, like, at all, right? Why are details important? Okay, details are important because if the small details don't matter, then the big details don't matter. And if no details matter, then nothing matters. Do you really want to live a life where nothing matters? Like, right? So do you really want to go down that nihilistic path that life has no purpose and meaning, right? So
it goes back to that old adage of how you do anything is how you do everything. And, you're just overlaying the small things, you're overlaying that, eventually add up to those big things.
Exactly. Yeah. So learning attention to detail, that everything matters. Just learning like basic processes, and I think a lot of the good things that the military does are based in common sense and just basic critical thinking, right? So you can kind of come about these in a lot of different ways, but the military obviously makes systems out of these things. So your basic AAR, after action review, how important is that for life? Like, you did something, okay, now let's actually think about that thing, think about what we screwed up, try to fix it so it doesn't keep happening, right? And that's hard for a lot of people, right? Especially in business too. It really applies to business because that's how my mind works. Like, if something goes wrong, if there's a problem, and there's constant problems, that's what business is. It's dealing with constant problems. How good are you at dealing with constant problems that come up? So I always, when something comes up, I'm like, I start digging into it. And it's like, you've got to make sure it's clear to people when you start digging into something. Hey, I'm not blaming you. Like, maybe it was your fault, but like, this is not, the point of this is not to call you out or to blame you. I'm trying to correct it now, because if it's not corrected now, it's going to keep happening.
Right. It's to get to the root cause, find out what that root cause is, and prevent it from happening in the future.
Yeah. You're trying to prevent future pain. I don't want to feel this pain again. Why do you, right? So just let's figure it out and let's fix it moving forward, right? So AAR's super important. Basic, like MDMP, military decision-making process, right?
Yeah.
I'm always looking at things through courses of action. I say, most likely scenario, best case scenario, worst case scenario. And that guides so much decision-making, because a lot of things that happen, maybe a problem comes up or an opportunity comes up. And I always start with the worst case scenario. Hey, if this bad thing actually, comes to fruition, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Okay. Can I live with this? Yes. Okay. That gives me peace of mind, right? It kind of quells the anxiety.
And also, if it ends up happening, then you've anticipated it and you're probably better prepared to deal with it at that point.
My mind's been there. So yes, exactly. I'm ready to deal with it now. Same on opportunity wise. Okay. If I take advantage of this opportunity, what's the worst case? Well, maybe you're going to lose a little bit of money. What's the best case? You could make a ton of money. Okay. Well, so always kind of looking at things, looking at decisions from those perspectives has been very, very useful.
So that last one was like a cost risk analysis
exactly.
that you're doing.
Yeah, everything is yes, exactly.
I want to go back and talk a little more about the hero worship that we were talking about that sometimes happens in the military. I know that I was definitely susceptible to it and still am to a certain degree. Just like you're saying, there's lots of traits about you that I admire and look up to. And that's one of the reasons why I've got you on the podcast. But there's lots of people that I had like that in the military. And fortunately, I've been able to interview lots of those. But I do think it's healthy to have those that you look up to, but also not to be disappointed if they do have some negative traits that we all do as humans. We're all going to make mistakes. And
for sure.
I just wanted to cover that a little a bit more.
No, absolutely.
But
I agree with you.
I think that was a great perspective, and I appreciate you sharing that. Looking back on your time in service, what did you find was most valuable about the experience? You talked about some of the things that you've already learned. Is there anything else that we haven't covered?
No. I think that's about it. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like, it was my bridge.
Do you have any experiences or stories that you'd like to talk about that stand out the most to you?
No, so not really. And I say that because like, it's hard because I always compare myself to other people, but in one direction. And, some people, they'll compare themselves to other people and they'll look down on other people, or they'll say, this person has more than me, whatever, right? That's a lot of what social media is, but that's not what I'm talking about. So I always compare myself to other people in one direction. I always look at people who are ahead of me and I admire what they're doing. So whatever aspect of life, whether it's business, family, financial, whatever it is, I say, okay, this person is way up here. They're way over there. And it does two things for me. It keeps me grounded, right? It keeps me very humble because I'm nowhere compared to that person. And not in a, oh, woe is me type of way, but it really keeps you grounded. And then the other is, hey, if that person can do it, why the hell can't I? Right? I can. So it's like
that guy puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like I do.
Yeah. So I always do comparisons with other people in one direction. So I never actually feel like I accomplish really anything. Like it's just, and especially like, okay, you do something and then it's over. And then it's like, okay, it's over. Who cares? And I know it's just like a general kind of,
it's time to have a new goal. And I think that's the point that I was going to make before I distracted myself in talking about heroes or mentors, people that you look up to, is that you set, they set the example for what it is that you want to achieve. So you shoot all your sights and all your focus and energies on achieving that. And then, once you've achieved that, then it's time to find a new role model and move on from there, or a new mentor, a new hero.
That's exactly it. And I can guarantee as soon as it turns 8:00 on Monday morning after Murph, I'll be like, all right, whatever. Who cares? Time to move on, right?
Yeah, it's time to get a new goal. For sure.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about your transition from military to business. What made you decide to leave the military?
Okay, so when I came in, I wanted to get to the highest level. So that was Delta. I went to selection twice. I didn't make it. Too slow. So now maybe I could have tried out for direct support or something, but I decided not to. So I was done with it. I'm very anti-authority, which is funny because you're in the military, right? But like obviously in special forces, you have a lot more leeway, right? So, but still you're in the military, right? So I hated having to kind of be switched on every day, just in terms of, uniforms and shit like that. That drove me crazy. It's just like, can we not do this? Like there was always somebody above you looking down, like waiting to, I don't know. I always felt like you were always on the verge of getting in trouble for something stupid, and I hated it. Right?
It sounds like a lot of special operators have that mentality. Once they've dealt with a certain level of combat, then they have, or just a certain level of experience, then they have a much lower tolerance for any of that kind of BS that doesn't I guess fit into what's important of the mission.
I think you're absolutely right. Right. So it's like, so yeah, you have experiences and they're profound experiences. And obviously those things shift your perspective on life. And hopefully it shifts in a good way. But one of those byproducts is, just like you mentioned, like, you start prioritizing different things, and these little stupid things are little stupid things, and you don't want to worry about those things, but you still have to.
Right. Whether or not you have a beard, or whether you're blousing your boots.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges of that transition that you made, and how did you adapt to handle those challenges?
Okay, so I started flipping houses back in 2007 when I was still in. Again, I got out in 2011, early 2011. And why did I start doing that? Well, I started watching those stupid TV shows, right? So it's like Property Ladder and Flip This House and Flip That House back in the day. But I started watching those and I was like, oh, I can do that, right? So I've got plenty of time. So in between deployments, I started doing that. I think I did 8 or 9 houses while I was still in. And it was just like, I remember the first house I did, I would finish work. I'd go to the house. I'd work on it myself because I wanted to learn the process of like remodeling and whatnot better. So I could actually tell a sub or a contractor what to do from from a informed place, as opposed to just, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, just go do this, right? I didn't want to get taken advantage of, I guess. And I wanted to learn the ins and outs of it. So I did that, and then I was able to, some things fell into place where I was able to kind of line up some private lending and whatnot, and I was able to set myself up. So when I got out, I was able to make a transition from, kind of doing that in my spare time to doing that full time. And business is tough. So
I bet it is.
Talk about a kick in the nuts constantly, right? So, but one thing that's important to know is the military pays very well, relative, right? It really does, because it covers so many expenses. When I got out, to maintain my same net pay, my same take-home pay after taxes, I had to actually pay myself about $2,000 more a month, because the taxes were so much more on the civilian side versus the military side. Not to mention, I've got no insurance, so you also have to pay for insurance, right? So just to have the same lifestyle and take home the same amount of money, I had to make more money from business. So so those first many years were very difficult. And actually, you know what? Let's talk about compound interest for a second.
Okay.
You know what that is, right?
Yeah.
You familiar? Okay. So, and I think most people have an idea, but just so we all are tracking on the same sheet of music, there's a reason why Warren Buffett calls it the eighth wonder of the world. It's such an important, not only a financial concept, but it's so analogous to everything in life, right? And obviously the idea is simple. You make slow and consistent, steady investments over a prolonged period of time, and eventually you get exponential results. So, and I think it's kind of the actual curve is kind of like a hockey stick, right? Where it's like very slow growth, and then after year 15, 20, something like that, it just explodes upward, right? That's life. That applies to everything. The problem is most people want that immediate result. They want immediate gratification. We're so used to that because we have the world at our fingertips with our smartphones, and I think it's destroying people's understanding of how the world actually works. The world works that if you're diligent, disciplined, and consistent for an extremely long time, you will get exponential growth, but it's not going to happen immediately.
Right.
And you're going to feel like you're failing constantly, and there's not going to be much growth. There's not going to be much change. And, what do they always say? The day after you quit is when you become successful, right? So that's a really important concept. And I think most people get it. It makes sense. They understand the math behind it, but you don't actually believe it until you actually experience it, right? Because you really just kind of have to have faith that it's actually going to happen, right? Because it hasn't happened in your life until it actually happens in your life, right? So you kind of have to buy into it.
I wish someone would have explained that concept to me earlier on. Maybe my dad did, but I just didn't pay attention because it was a very difficult lesson for me to learn as a kid and a younger adult, just in life in general, but also with investing. I didn't start investing until later on. I wish I would have started much earlier, but definitely as a young adult, I didn't realize that. Now, stepping back and looking back at life, it's just like what we talked about earlier as far as, small wins and doing lots of the little things the right way. They all add up over time until it gets to an incredible, magnificent tipping point.
Exactly. And most people, the idea is not what's going on today. Where are you 10 years from now, right? And in 10 years from now, you should be looking around at your peer group and being kind of dumbfounded as to where they are, because they are so far behind you because they haven't made that consistent investment over time, right? So and it's not you trying to get ahead of them. It's just you happen to be ahead of them because you're actually moving towards your potential, right? So, and is there any other purpose in life besides like aiming yourself towards your highest potential and then moving in that direction, like what else is there to do? Nothing.
Yeah, all you need is 1% of improvement, steady pressure. What did I do? What did I do today that makes me 1% better than yesterday?
And I think a problem that a lot of people have is that they set the bar way too high, right? Like, so there's always New Year's resolutions, right? People get all excited. Well, first of all, if it was that important, why did you start on January 1st, right? Second of all, you probably set the bar too high. Third of all, there was probably no why behind what you're doing, right? So it's going to fail from the get-go. I think people always have great ideas, but execution is terrible. Execution requires a lot of discipline and a lot of pain. It's not going to be a smooth process, and it's going to be difficult, and you just have to stay the course.
But also people can put those big goals that might be too big for New Year's resolutions into bite-sized chunks. If you do a certain activity for 10 minutes every day over the course of a year, then look at the exponential gains that you're going to get after that year.
Bingo, exactly. So, and one thing, I know we're kind of getting sidetracked, which is awesome, because I love talking about this stuff, but one thing that I do is, and it's not a new concept, it's my take on it, is winning the day. So if I can stack up wins every single day, and at the end of the day, if I can look back and this is something that has to be quantifiable. It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling, right? If you can quantify that you won the day and you add up, like you just said, you add up all those wins over the course of a year, many years, you're going to be so far ahead in life. You're going to be so much closer to that person that you want to become. So how do you do that? Well, I learned a couple years ago that I was setting my bar too high. So I've got specific things on my list that I do every single day. And if I do those things, then that day is considered a win. And it's really important that they're quantifiable. And the reason being is because some days you're going to feel emotions that you had a terrible day. I mean, life is going to kick your ass a lot of days, especially in business. Like every day you feel like you get beat up. A lot of days you feel that way. So if you're not able to actually quantify the wins, then you're just going to feel like it was a loss, and then you're not going to be able to stack those days up, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And losses count more than wins in life. They have more weight than a win does. Like you need more wins to counterbalance a loss, it seems like, for whatever reason.
Right, but I think there's definite reason behind those failures and why they hurt so much is to fuel you to not experience that again.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So the other piece to this is, like, if you're aiming towards your potential, you've got to like break down the different aspects of your life. And there's not many, right? Like there's personal, there's your family, there's friends, relationships with family, relationships with your friends. There's probably work stuff, financial, spiritual, business. There's not many. You got to break all these down and kind of have a plan to get better at all of them at the same time. But
to do that, you need to minimize distractions like what we have right here in these phones.
Exactly.
And tune out the noise.
Yes. Yeah, which is extremely hard to do. So my wins, this is what I count as a win for the day. Okay. I've got to learn something or read something 30 minutes a day minimum. And that's pretty easy to do with earphones. And I mostly do audiobooks. But you can do that while you're driving in the car. Actually, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, grab a sip of water, put in my earphones, start a book. And then I've got 20 minutes done of reading for the day after I've gone to the bathroom and brushed my teeth and let the dogs outside and all that stuff. So it's a huge head start.
Yeah, I was going to ask you this later on, what your routine of your day is, but we can talk about it now. This is a great time to talk about it. So if you can kind of walk us through what your average daily routine is.
So I get up early because I like to have most of my important stuff done before people get up. It just makes me feel better about myself. So it's probably not necessary. And I probably get up too early, but I get up between 3:30 and 4.
Wow.
And again, the first thing I do is I stand up, drink some water, put in the earphones, start a book, and then, go to the bathroom, and then take the dogs outside because they always wake up. So got to feed them, take them out. That whole process is about 20 minutes. And then I always, so while I'm talking about this, I'll go over the things that compromise the win. So reading 30 minutes minimum, that's one thing. The next piece is working out. Another piece on work days, it's, hey, I need to get done. I always, the day before, identify at least like 2 to 4 of the most important things that have to get done tomorrow, right? And like those are my big 3 things. So I always prioritize those, and I have to get those done in order to consider the day a win, right? So I get up, and I'm usually down in my office by about 4:15, 4:20. And then I'll get a little bit of work done for about 40 to 45 minutes. And hopefully I can get some of those big 2-3 things done and check those off the list. And then I go to the gym from, I usually leave around 5:10. The first CrossFit class is 5:30 to 6:30. So I always do that class because it's the first one. It gets my mind in the right place, my body and my mind in the right place, right? And then kind of come back, and our work day starts at 6:45. Especially in construction. I mean, everybody starts early, so we have to start early. So we start early, and we try to finish as early as possible, if at all possible. But that's kind of the general flow. And then, so I'm a big list person. I've got my list right here, right next to me, right? I always have it with me because a list is so important for a lot of different reasons. I think it's the greatest tool for helping deal with anxiety. And I'm a very anxious person. I know I have a lot of anxieties, but I've developed a lot of different tools and techniques that I use to kind of keep them under control. And we all, again, life hits us hard all the time, right? So,
yeah, but you set yourself up to have less anxiety if you get up earlier and you're able, like if I think about what causes me anxiety, it's if I'm running late, I'm rushing out the door, I get stuck behind a school bus, and then, that puts me 5 minutes later than I want to be, before training, and, just kind of sets the whole day behind. Whereas you set yourself up to win the day if you just get up earlier, you give yourself more time,
exactly,
et cetera, and just the things that you're explaining now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like how do you win the morning? You win the night before. How do you win the night before? You win the afternoon, and like on and on and on.
Constant preparation.
Right? Yeah. So I found something out years and years ago. I needed to end my day. Because my mind was chaos, especially as a business owner, you're always thinking about stuff, right? There's always stuff going on. So what I found out, what I figured out to do was to, at the end of my day, no matter what's left on my list, I'm going to tear that sheet of paper off, and I'm going to anything left over from that list, I'm going to put on tomorrow's list, and I'm going to add anything else I know I need to do. But it's not just work stuff. I put on there, read 30 minutes, work out, journal. If I've got to get an oil change, whatever it is.
Do you find a great degree of satisfaction in checking those things off too? I know
dopamine hit, right? It's a huge dopamine hit. And you build up momentum throughout the day by doing that, right? So
stacking those victories.
Yeah. It's all that
wins.
Micro stuff that adds up to a lot, like we keep talking about, right? So that's extremely important. And then I was kind of talking about before, again, life throws a lot of shit at you all the time, right? And it can be very overwhelming sometimes. When I feel overwhelmed, the first thing I do is step back, take a few breaths, and I make a list. Break all those things down, right? There's all this stuff coming in. It all needs to happen right now, right? Because everything's so important, which it's obviously not. But so there's all this stuff coming in, and you can either be very reactive to it, or you can be proactive. Reactive is allowing the world to control your life. Proactive is you controlling the world. There's only one way to live, and that's proactive, right? But most people are so reactive in everything that they do. So in order to be proactive, the best tool that I've come up with is when these things come in, pause, take stock of everything, right? Think through them. Definitely force yourself from reacting to anybody or anything in the moment. Just push people off. Hey, I'll get back to you in 10 minutes. Just stand by. I'll get back to you.
Right. Need time to process.
Is anybody dying? Okay, calm down then, right? Right. Because there's always somebody dying, right? So everything's always so important to everybody. But yeah, write everything down, prioritize, and then you have an actionable plan in place. Well, in order to not feel anxious, to not feel overwhelmed, I don't need those things to be done. I need a plan for those things to be done, right? And I think most people, they think that they need to solve or finish the thing, address the thing. And you don't need to. You just need to have a plan in place to get to that solution. Right. So that's why the list is so important.
That's great. And that applies to so many things, is having that underlying structure that if things, not necessarily go off the rails, but, if you have a sidebar that you can direct it back. So that's what I do with podcasting. I have an outline and I have a list of the things that I want to cover. Or if I'm doing a DJ performance, I'll have a certain track list, but I know that the night it might change depending on the dynamic and the energy of the crowd, and I might have to go different ways, but it gives me that basic structure to, if I need to deviate from it, fine, but also if things don't go according to plan, they kind of go to shit, then I can fall back to that
For
plan.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to get back to the transition from military to business, because I feel that it's a really important one for veterans to try to understand better, people that are in the military and that are going through that process, because it can be a very difficult one. But I did want to ask you the question, what do you miss most from your time in the military?
So there was about like 2% of really cool stuff and fun stuff, and then 98% bullshit, right? So I miss that 2%. So like doing the job, I miss that. So
yeah, I miss that as well. One of the things that I miss most from my time in the military is the camaraderie.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
And were you able to find another way to fulfill the need of belonging to a community of like-minded people? Was that CrossFit for you, or was there anything else that did that?
Nothing is the same as a team room.
Right.
It's really tough. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's tough, especially being the business owner, right? Like you can't joke around with people in the same manner, right? You've got to be kind of not above that, but you can't have that same type of, the same type of bullshitting doesn't go on in an office as it does in a team room, right?
I would imagine you have a much more diverse set of people that you're working with, and they're not all of the same, upbringing that we had in the military. Yeah,
so thankfully they're not like super uptight or anything. So like we joke around and stuff. Like don't get me wrong, but it's different, right? It's different. So and plus you're in a different role now, so you have to always set an example. You always have to push people. You're getting constant kickback from everybody, including your employees. I mean, it's just normal. You're going to get everybody, including yourself, is going to resist things at all times. I don't know why. Well, I kind of know why, but they make things a lot harder than they need to, right? So, but that's part of it.
Is there a way that you've found that sense of, or been able to fulfill that sense of community and belonging, or have you? I know you've done it through family, and that's very important. But have you done it through other means? Like, did you find that in CrossFit? Yeah, like CrossFit, my gym is my second home, right? Like, because I'm just so used to it and so comfortable there. So that definitely exists there. So during your time in the military, is there anything you would have done differently to better prepare yourself for civilian life? No, I don't do regret. So, I mean, obviously I look back and say, I think regret is a very, very bad thing and a very destructive thing in people's minds. If you look back, and I'm not saying you were implying this, but if you look back with any regret, you're pretty much saying that if I could go back in time and change something, I would. Okay, then you're not the person you are now. And if you're not the person you are now, how do you change? You don't. So it's like, if you regret stuff from the past, you're stuck where you are. So like, it doesn't matter what you did. It's just a learning experience, right? Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. I was just wondering if there was anything that you've learned from that you might be able to offer some advice to someone else. I know for me, I think I would have tried to, I was on a compressed timeline because of my situation. I don't want to go into detail about that, but I think things would have happened on a much shorter time scale if I would have gotten my my VA, things handled a little bit earlier or something like that. And I was just wondering if you could offer any advice to people like that. If not, no worries.
I don't think so. No.
Like I said, it can be a tough transition in many ways. Do you have any advice on how to combat feelings of estrangement and loneliness veterans often experience after being removed from the military's team-centric environment?
Yeah, I think so. I think one problem is, one problem I see a lot of people have is their self-identity is tied up in their job, right? A lot of people, not just military, especially military, but a lot of people in general. And if your self-identity is tied up in your job or something like that, when that goes away, what are you going to do? You don't know who you are anymore. That's scary, right? That's lonely. That's terrifying. So I think one of the most important things you can do is to disassociate your self-identity from your job, because your self-identity should be based on your character and not what you do. And then your self-identity, it'll stay in place and it won't get ruined. But I think identifying the skills that you've learned in the military, this is an important thing. It seems that like a lot of people, because they worked in the military, that they don't understand the skills that they've actually learned. So like understanding those skills and being able to articulate them and explain those and maybe put them on a resume is really important, but also not thinking that you have to be in a specific industry, right? Like just because you were in the military doesn't mean you have to do something related to the government or defense. And understanding that you shouldn't be looking for a specific industry, but more of a specific role that you enjoy doing. Like whether that's management, problem solving, team building, whatever it is, like those exist across all industries, right? So like identify that thing that you like, that you're good at, that you have skills in, and then understand how to actually kind of sell that you have experience in that. And then like the entire world opens up to you, instead of thinking that, I can only do this one thing because of my experience. Right. So just having that understanding is important, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when I was younger, it was much more difficult for me to understand that, because when you're steeped in that military environment, most people have those qualities because that's how we've been indoctrinated and brought up, but so you don't realize that those values are in very high demand on the outside,
Big time.
Good leadership, selfless service, to being on time or ahead of time to be on time. And, just those kind of basic things that were taught in the military that people outside of the military have a much more difficult time grabbing on to the concepts.
I've got great news for everyone. The standards are so low. Like, it's so easy to be great or good at anything because the standards are so low.
Yeah, if you just put in a little bit of extra effort, just a little bit goes a long way.
Can you be consistently average? That's enough. You're a great performer now, right? So like, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. So.
Right, but that might be something, that's great. Thanks for sharing that for, veterans, people that are coming out of the Army to, really think about. What advice would you offer to veterans looking to make a similar transition into the world of business and entrepreneurship outside of what we just talked about?
Start now, work hard. It's going to be a grind, right? So like, don't do the whole, I was thinking about starting a business and I got to do this and that. Okay. You want to start a business? Okay. Get on LegalZoom or just file for your business. Takes a couple hours. Get your EIN. Once you have that, go to a bank, open up a bank account, figure out a way to process payments.
What's an EIN?
Oh, it's it's the government version of your social security number. Okay. So it's attached to your business. So get that established, figure out the means of processing payment, figure out what you're going to sell. You're set up for business now. Don't take a year to do that. Like do that in an afternoon, right? Like most people they make things a lot more complicated than they are. You just have to start, right? Like, so there's 4 parts to anything. I break this down this way. I'm always telling my employees this, right? Like, everybody has ideas. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, it's great that you have an idea, but everybody has those same ideas, right? So ideas are easy. Nobody cares about them. The next step to an idea is actually starting, right? Implementing the plan from that idea.
Taking action.
Starting is very difficult. And I always it's the analogy that I use is like, we've all had to push a car before, right? That broke down, right? And the initial push is the hardest push. After it's going, it's a lot easier, right? So when it's at a dead stop, it takes a lot more energy, but once it starts rolling, it's a lot easier. So starting is very difficult. If you do that, that's awesome. A lot of people can't even get there. And then once it starts moving, it becomes a lot easier. But there's actually one thing that's harder than starting: finishing, right? Most people, and this applies to every task that you could ever do in life. Most people, if they have the idea and they can get started and they can kind of do that middle portion, actually finishing that task is extremely difficult for most people. Most people get to 90%, 95% and call it a day. So
that goes back to, sometimes when you quit, it's like the very next day.
Right there.
It's right there. And if I could just give an example, when I went through tryouts for the Golden Knights in 1993, we had a very long run, and we would stop out by, Sicily Drop Zone, where you've got some hills there, and they'd stop the bus and have us push the bus up the hill, get back in the bus, we'll drive for a little ways. Okay, get out of the bus, we're going to run. And you didn't know how far that you were going to have to run. And it was just a big mental exercise.
Sure.
They were going to trick you and see what you're made of, see what your character is made up of. And there was a person who dropped out.
Yep.
He's like, I can't make it anymore. We were just trying to, and we were like, no, come on, man, you got this. Don't stop. Do not quit. He quit, and we got over the next hill. The bus is waiting there for us, and they were like, congratulations, you guys. And he just missed out, and he wasn't, he didn't become a Golden Knight that year because he stopped just short of the finish line.
Did you talk to him afterwards? Did you?
No, he was, because they get you into the barracks, they yank you out, and they pack your stuff, and you're out of there.
Yeah. That's a great story. That is life in a nutshell, right? So you want to start a business, like, first get those mechanics out of the way with fast. Don't stall, just go do them. And then figure out the process. Business is all about creating systems and processes. The better you are at creating systems and processes, the better your business is going to go. You can't wing it. Most people just wing things. They just make it up as they go. Like, okay, you can do that and survive, but you're not going to thrive, right? So you can kind of just make shit up and and this is another thing. Do you want to work for the business or work on the business? It's a huge difference. Most people work for their business. Like, they own their own jobs. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But there's a huge difference between working for the business and owning your job and running a business. Completely different.
What is that difference, and how do you distinguish the two?
Well, I think everybody starts working for the business because, like, you have to start and you have to build it, right? So, but at some point, you should always be looking towards, you always want to work yourself out of a job, always, right? Because what are you always trying to find in business? You're not trying to make more money. You're trying to find time. And you're trying to find time so you can do more stuff, right? Like, and it's understanding that time is finite. We're all going to die. So I've got to figure out how to optimize so I can focus on the more important stuff. And obviously I want to hire people to do not the menial stuff, but the stuff that can be systematized that I don't have to do. I want to hire people to do those things, right? I want to focus on the big picture stuff and, like, actually running the business and kind of like we talked about before, the overall strategic vision of the business.
I was going to say you're working from a more strategic perspective.
It's hard, though, because as a business owner, anybody who starts a business, they're in the same boat where it's like you're wearing a lot of different hats. You're doing a lot of different jobs. So it's hard not to necessarily relinquish some of those things, but when you start passing things off to employees as your business grows, like it can be difficult in that, like, you know the job better than anybody, but you're asking somebody else to do it. They're not going to do it as good as you can, but you have to let them do it. It's tough, right? It's tough to see somebody make mistakes, and people are going to make mistakes, and there should be a lot of grace, obviously, because we learn from our mistakes. We learn from our failures. But like when somebody's making the same mistake 2, 3, 4 times, that's too far, right?
Right.
So,
that requires some correction.
Yeah. So like, if you're trying to start a business, like, again, get that stuff out of the way with that initial just administrative stuff, and then figure out how to optimize your business at all times. Like, work on the systems, work on the SOPs, constantly improve your business. Every problem that comes up, realize it's your fault and figure out how to fix it. And I think somebody said this, and I completely agree with this. Business is the greatest self-awareness mechanism that exists, because you have to be so honest with yourself all the time. Like, every bad thing that happens to your business is your fault. It has to be, because if it's not your fault, it's going to keep happening, right? And eventually you're going to be out of business.
Well, as a business owner, you're the leader, and you need to have that mentality of extreme ownership in order to be able to solve the problems and move on to the next thing.
Which obviously so applies to everything in life, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
And just so that I have a better understanding, so one of the key elements that you're talking about, just to summarize it a bit more, is efficiency in business. So you're trying to streamline as many things as possible so that you have more time to, in turn, be more effective.
Yes. Yeah. So you're always looking for time for a couple of reasons. The first is, if you're trying to grow a business, how do you grow a business with no time? Like, you can't, because it's going to take more time and effort to actually do more stuff, right? So you need to find more time. So like, if in a normal day, you use up 100% of that day doing whatever you're working on now, how are you going to grow the business? You're going to add more hours to the day. I mean, obviously you can work longer, but you get the idea. Right. So you've got to focus on efficiency, productivity, find time. And so one of two things, one, you can grow the business. You have time to grow the business. And 2, you have more free time, right? So yeah, it's key.
Absolutely. I'd like to share a fun fact about the beautiful house I'm living in, and the house we're doing this podcast in was designed and built by you and your wife, Sarah, and your company. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. And, thanks for buying it.
We already talked about, what got you into real estate development, and we've talked about some of the challenges that you've faced in your business experience so far. Are there any others that we haven't covered?
Oh man, so many challenges, right? It's a lot of failures and some successes, some wins, right? So, but mostly failures. But I always learn from them. So, and there's been some big ones. So,
are there any that you care to talk about?
Sure. So, so my first 6 years in business, just to put this in context, and obviously like those first 3 years, I'm still in the military. Those next 3 years when I got out, and probably a few years after that, at least 75 to 80 hour work weeks every week.
Wow.
Legit working, not just screwing around, just grinding, trying to figure it out. Like, I didn't know how I was going to be successful or how I was going to get things done, but I was going to. One thing I've always done, I never give myself a back door. So I always burn the bridges, right? Always, on everything. I just don't give myself that option, probably because I know I would take it if I had it, right? So I just eliminate that initially. What
was that old story about, I think it was Spanish...
the conquistadors.
The conquistadors who burned the ships after they arrived, just so that force the men to hunker down and fight. Yeah,
you got to do that. Like, you can't, if you allow yourself an excuse, you're probably going to take it,
right?
Because most of us are weak. I'm weak too. It's just I know that about myself, so I structure my life in a way that I'm not in a position where I have to where I could potentially give into that weakness, right? It's like, hey, I probably shouldn't eat a lot of ice cream. Don't buy it. If it's in the house, I'm going to eat it, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
just don't buy it, right? But yeah, what were we talking about? Oh, failures. Okay, big failure. So the first 6, 7, 8 years, just long weeks. I remember a lot of times just like standing in my office, staring out the window, thinking to myself, how the hell am I going to do this? Like, I'm just mentally burned out, psychologically burned out, physically burned out. Like, just like, oh my God, this is so painful. How am I going to keep going? Right. And like, and it wasn't like, I always knew that I could. Like, I knew I would figure it out, but I was like, you're still asking yourself the question, like, how? Oh, and this is an important thing, I think, too. I'm going to take us off on a short tangent here.
Yeah.
One of the most important things that, not that I learned, but an experience that I got from the military. So I can't say this happened at this time, but once you put yourself in enough difficult, adverse, physical, mental, psychological situations where there's a lot of adversity, once you put yourself in enough of those, eventually you get to a point where you stop asking the question, can I do something? And it turns into, how can I accomplish this thing? Right? So like, I think the most important thing that people have, the most difficult roadblock that people have is that lack of self-belief. And they're trying to figure out, well, can I do this thing? Right? So like, I don't have that. That disappeared a long time ago, thankfully.
Okay, so you're saying that you refrain from wasting the mental energy on whether or not you can do it, and you just focus on, how to do the thing. Am I understanding you right?
Partially, it's mostly like, I just believe I can do anything.
Okay.
It disappeared. Like that, I can't do something, or that self-doubt, it just disappeared. And it disappears. The only way it can disappear is by putting yourself in challenging situations and then coming out on the other end. That's the only way, right? But like, it's like people read books on mental toughness and grit and all this stuff. They're great books. I've read them too, but you don't actually gain grit by reading a book.
Right. There's a certain amount of, if you get caught in that cycle of mental masturbation from reading those books, and you don't move on to the next stage of taking action on, what's in those books, then you're just going to be stuck in that phase.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever that happened, and that happened years ago, that kind of belief that, no, I'm going to figure it out. I'm not sure how, but I will. Right. So, and I wasn't like pushing aside a negative thought. The negative thought didn't exist. It was just, I am going to.
Is that a superpower you've always had, or is that something you had to develop over?
It was developed, 100% developed.
And that was, you credit your time in the military for helping you with that?
Definitely.
Awesome.
Definitely. So how that applies to like the grind in business is like, yeah, I don't see the path forward. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, but I know I'm going to get there. Not sure where, not sure how, but I'm going to get there, right?
You just look at that next step. Hey, I'm going to focus on this next step, and then the next one. And
I just got to make it through today, and then tomorrow, then the next day. Yeah.
And then that curve goes up.
Yeah. So I made a really stupid decision. Sorry, I was going to tell you this. I've always watched these homes or shows on HGTV, these house flipping shows and whatnot. So again, I'm grinding it out. I'm not making a lot of money per house. I'm making enough to pay my salary, right? And a tiny bit extra, not much though. And it's a very liquid business. Like you need a lot of capital at all times. And I didn't have a lot of capital. So anyways, I'm like, I need to figure out how to make more money. And it was really tough in this market because it's a military town. So like there's not a lot of high priced homes because it's based on what people make in the military, right? So there's not like a lot of margins in between the purchase price and a sales price. So I'm like, man, I need to do something. So long story short, I bought a home in Pinehurst, a foreclosure. And I thought, this is going to be it. I'm going to make a decent amount of money on this one. And then this is going to help me. And hopefully I can repeat this. I did not do my research. I kind of probably rushed into it. And long story short, over the course of the 3 years that it took to sell it, I lost $167,000 on it, just in like constant interest payments and just, I had to sell it for less and just all that stuff. So that was, it's a lot of money now, but that was a lot of money back then, right? Because again, I'm making enough to live, but I'm not making enough to grow the business and thrive.
Okay.
Right. So that was a great lesson, an expensive one, but a great lesson. So, yeah.
What have you found most rewarding about business?
Well, like I said, I hate authority. I don't like being told what to do. So I get to, dictate the terms of my life. So family is the most important thing to me. So I've been able to structure my life so I get to spend as much time with my family as possible. Right. So, we're fortunate. So my wife doesn't have to work. She homeschools our daughter, which is awesome and my home office is kind of semi-attached to our house. So I can pop in, say hi. She comes over, says hi throughout the day, and I'm just around my family all day, which is awesome. So I've been able to structure my life how I want to live it. But that came from, and this took me a long time to learn. And I don't think most people actually fully understand this. You actually are the author of your own story. You get to write the story. Most people are characters in somebody else's story, right? But and especially in business, there's no rules. You can do whatever you want. It's just, okay, have an idea. Okay, great. You have an idea, now implement it. But what about? No, not what about. You can do whatever you want. So, but it takes a long time to learn that because there's so much unlearning of everything you've been taught throughout your entire life.
Okay.
I spent my late 20s, early 30s unlearning everything, right? And learning how to view the world through a different perspective.
As a protagonist and not a non-player character.
Yeah. And how do you do that? You've got to read stuff. You've got to read books, right? And that's one really important thing that happened to me. I'm not sure how I came about this, but I started just kind of seeing videos on YouTube back in 2014. And I started kind of going down that whole self-development rabbit hole with Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, and all those guys. And so I heard Jim Rohn say something. Maybe I read it. Maybe it was a video. I can't remember. But it completely changed my life. And he said, your business is not going to grow until you grow. I'm like, son of a bitch. That hit me so hard over the head. I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm so focused on the business and I'm not focused on myself. Right. It was such a hard, it was a really, it was an easy pill to swallow, but it was a hard pill to swallow. Cause this is what I'm doing wrong. I can't be focused on trying to only focus on the business. I have to focus on my growth, my self-development. And then the byproduct of that will be the business will eventually be able to grow. It'll keep up with me because the business is nothing more than a reflection of the owner, right? It's nothing more than that. It's not its own separate entity. It is the owner, right? So
what were some of the action steps that you took to improve yourself?
So and first of all, I'm not very good at this stuff, but I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not I'm not as consistent as I need to be. So let me preface it. So, I'm a lot of this, I'm talking to myself. I'm not preaching here. I'm just talking to myself. So these are things that I need to do and constantly need to focus on and work on. So again, it's kind of breaking down the different components of your life. So, okay, how do I improve my relationship with my wife, with my daughter constantly? How do I improve that? How am I a better leader in the business? how is my spirituality better? Like, so it's identifying those different things. And then like, okay, with my wife, I need to communicate better. We need to sit down once a week and, just talk about things. We need to spend X amount of time a day, just, whatever it is. Right. But it's like, it's breaking all those things down and then just finding very small things you can do every single day to actually move yourself in that direction you want to go. But a big part is that win the day list. That really is kind of the foundational piece for my personal self-development, reading, working out my mind, working out my body. And then one of the things on there is always a minimum of 15 minutes quality time with my family. Doesn't seem like a lot, but again, it's a very low bar. And I would much rather have 15 minutes of real quality time with my family than 3 hours of just watching TV with them, right?
This is in line with a podcast I listened to yesterday that had a Navy SEAL by the name of DJ on it, and he addressed a lot of these concepts and introduced some concepts I haven't heard before. One of those was the concept of dials. So which each of those different areas of focus in life that you're talking about is being able to turn down the dial for the one that you're leaving and turn up the dial for the one that you're focusing on. So if you're going from work, you're going to dial that down and get ready to turn up the dial for family. And turning up that dial means tuning out distractions and noises, such as phone. Hey, if and this is something I can definitely get better about as well. I think we all can. But if Jen, my wife, wants to talk to me about something, I need to remind myself, hey, if I'm doing something on the phone, that it's not that important. I need to put it down. I need to give you my full undivided attention. And that goes along with, turning up that dial. And I'm just wondering if that's a concept that you're aware of, or is that just something that you normally do?
I like that analogy a lot. I look at it as I do something similar where it's more of, okay, if you want to do something, you've got to do that thing, but you've got to figure out how much energy to put towards that thing, right? Because some things require more energy, some things less. So like, you've got to figure out, like, if this problem is in front of me, it may require a small amount or a large amount. If nothing's getting done, I need to turn up that dial, increase the energy I have devoted towards that problem, right? So that's kind of how I see things, but I like that dial analogy a lot. It's
okay, good. And maybe some of that goes to as far as where you apply that energy is what's going to fill my cup or what's going to drain it.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And I think, especially as I get older, like the most important things are, well, putting myself in the right state so I can optimize my day, right? Like I want to have as much energy as possible throughout my day so I can perform optimally in my business and in my personal relationships, right? And then that's how I get the most out of my life, right? And then that allows me to take on as much responsibility as I can, and through that responsibility comes meaning and purpose, right? And that's what we're all looking for, is meaning and purpose. Well, where does that come from? Take on responsibility, right? You have to take on as much as you possibly can. And then once you do that, you start finding meaning and purpose, but you certainly can't do that from a negative place. So,
yeah, that's a great way to frame that. Based on your experience, what are 3 of the most important elements which commonly lead to successful outcomes across all of your endeavors?
I think I've certainly hit on a few, so I'll hopefully I'm not regurgitating too much, but you got to start. You have to have a plan and start. But the most important things are discipline, right? Because generally speaking, we always know what the right thing to do is, right? Like you probably know what the right thing to do is most of the time, right? But are you doing the right thing? Probably not. So, well, I guess the foundational piece is stop lying to yourself. Like we all lie to ourselves constantly, right? And that goes back to self-awareness. And it's really easy to lie to yourself. And it's really hard to tell what the truth actually is, right? So lies are easy to tell. But the more you're focused on stopping the lies that you tell yourself, the more you start to live in the present. And when you start to live in the present, that gives you control over your life. So most of what we do throughout our day, whether it's physical or mental, it happens at the subconscious level. So but if you want to make a change in your life, you've got to be aware of what's going on. So you've got to get out of the subconscious and into the conscious. How do you do that? Well, you've got to be thinking about things constantly. You've got to be present. You've got to be self-aware. You have to stop lying to yourself. So, because if you can't get out of the subconscious and move to the conscious and be aware in the present, then you can't possibly take control over that situation, right? Like, how do you control something if you're operating subconsciously? If it's just some habit that you developed 20 years ago, you can't. So you got to stop lying to yourself. You got to work extremely hard, be disciplined, and be honest with yourself when you're telling yourself those lies, or when you know you have to do something that you don't want to do. Just do it. Like, it's your choice. Like, it goes back to, that's the thing you can control, right? There's so many things you can't control. You can control those choices you make throughout the day. So, yeah.
The way I've heard it put is, if, when you're making a decision as far as that goes, it can be anything, hey, am I going to, stay out drinking tonight when I know it's going to negatively affect, I'm going to have to sleep in tomorrow. It's going to set me behind for this and that. The way that I've heard it put is, the decision that I'm making right now, is it going to benefit or hurt the group? So essentially, is it going to benefit my family? Yes or no? Is it going to benefit my business, for example? Yes or no? And, I think that might be a simple way that you can frame that and then conduct yourself to make those better decisions.
I think so. Empathy and compassion, right? Like, put yourself in other people's shoes. So yeah, definitely.
We've talked about how you managed it all. You're spinning so many plates at one time, and it's just, to me, it's totally fascinating on how you manage that. But you've also managed to find time to focus on a couple of hobbies. You play the guitar, and you recently earned your private pilot's license. What do you enjoy most about those activities?
I've always liked music, so I'm not very good, but I do enjoy to play the guitar. So I try to practice a little bit every day, but I don't know. It's like it's an expression, right? Like, you're kind of, and especially a guitar. I don't know. You feel things when you play, right? So it's because obviously you play too. So maybe you can describe this better. But like, when you're playing something, you can actually like put your emotions into it, and I think maybe it's almost a release, right? So. I don't know. I just enjoy it. So I've always liked music. So
I definitely find that as a creative release, and I can sense not only in the way that I'm playing, or in the way that I'm playing makes me feel, but also in the reaction that I get from maybe Jen. If she's just sitting around the house and she's forced to listen to me playing the guitar, she's like, "Oh, you're really sounding a lot better." And it seems to be those times where I'm playing with more emotion and, not just, going through the motions and playing. But yeah, it's something that I really enjoy.
Yes.
What do you find enjoyable about flying and the whole process of earning your private pilot's license?
Nothing. I haven't flown in a year. So it's, it was
Did you find it more stressful?
Yes.
Really?
So stressful. So yeah, like in December of 2022, Sarah, my wife, she's like, "Hey, I got you a surprise for Saturday. Dress warmly." I'm like, "I don't like surprises. No, we're not going to do this." So I got her to tell me. She got me a test flight, or whatever it's called. So I went out there, flew around for like 30 minutes. It was pretty cool. I mean, it's cool. It's a unique experience. So I decided that, hey, this would be a good challenge. So I pursued it, and it was so stressful and so time consuming. Like, on average, I probably spent 3 hours a day, because I mean, flying is not a passion of mine. I knew nothing about anything before. So I was starting at zero in terms of knowledge base. You had to learn all this stuff to take the test. I always over prepare. So there was a lot of time invested in studying, making sure I knew everything, and then just driving there, flying, coming back, doing that multiple times a week. It was just a huge time suck. And I'm not used to being the person anymore that does stupid shit, right? It's like, hey, dumbass, you shouldn't have done this. It's just like that feeling, right? So I wasn't used to that, and that it did not feel good, right? So I'm used to the person being in charge telling other people that they're doing dumb shit, right? So that was hard to get used to, but it was good discomfort, right? So, but so I saw it through. Honestly, I probably would have stopped if not for my daughter. I didn't want to set a bad example for her. I started it, so I finished it. So I got my license, and then I was thinking about getting a plane, but it just never came. Obviously, the cool thing is once you have your license, you always have your license, right? So it's like, obviously you got to kind of recert and everything,
stay current,
do that stuff. But yeah. So,
what were your takeaways from it that were positive that you learned from?
It's cool to learn new skills, right? It's a cool skill to have, and just the process of learning it. And I did learn obviously a lot of stuff about, obviously at a very comparative base level to other people, but you've got to learn quite a bit to actually pass the test and go fly and everything. So just learning that stuff was very interesting. Again, it was nothing I was passionate about, but it was cool to learn about something different that like wasn't in my lane, so.
Right. Yeah. And, then it goes back, I think, to, what fills your cup or what drains it. So for you, I think, if you didn't have a big interest in aviation, you learn that through the process, and you learn that, okay, there's too many negatives to this that, detract from the areas of life that I'm more focused in. So I'm going to trim the fat, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd like to get back to something else in your lifestyle that we talked about, and that was books. I do a lot of reading as well, and I find them extremely beneficial. Do you have any books you recommend which have had a meaningful impact on your life?
Lots of them, right? So many. Yeah, so I think my favorite books are kind of more psychological books. So let's see. Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning. He's got a couple other books too, but that's good.
I haven't read that one.
Okay. So he was
look into it.
He was a psychologist. His family was killed. He was Jewish. Part of the Holocaust. He was in a couple different concentration camps. And somebody like him, then you take somebody like Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I said that name completely wrong. Sorry, I butchered it. But he wrote the Gulag Archipelago about Russia. Anyways, both these guys had horrible experiences during World War II and after World War II. And they both came to the exact same conclusion. And that was everything that happened to me was my fault. They didn't blame other people. They said, what happened to me was my fault. And they accepted that. And they went on to have amazing lives afterwards. Even though terrible things happened to them, I'm pretty sure all of Frankl's family was killed. But he took ownership of his life and said, this was because of me. And really, there's an old saying that, what is the saying? It has something to do with that. Tyranny cannot exist. Tyranny can only exist in a world of lies, right? Like if people have integrity, it cannot exist. And I think that's kind of what they both were referring to. So they're both very powerful books. There's so many lessons to be learned from that time period. And we kind of just gloss over it, I think, a lot. But like learning about all those horrible things that happen and trying to understand why people did those things. Because guess what? I got bad news for everybody. I know you think that you wouldn't take part in the Holocaust, that you wouldn't be a Nazi. I'm sorry, you would be, right? Because everybody was during that time. Like, you're not so high up and so morally superior that you would have stopped that, right? It's just utter nonsense.
Yeah, there's not only the mob mentality, but when you have so much at stake, what decisions are you going to make in that moment in time? Are you going to make the the maybe easier decisions in the moment to protect yourself and your family, or are you going to stand up for what's right and possibly sacrifice all that, like, like the authors did in the concentration camps?
So I think understanding that and like digging into it and thinking about it a lot, it helps you. It hopefully helps guide your life and make you a more mentally strong person, right? So again, this is why details matter, because you want to always be preparing for something more significant that happens in your life, right? And like, if you're not doing the little things right, you're not going to do the big thing right. So that's my take from those books.
I've, read and heard about the concept and, tried to apply it myself, but of extreme ownership, and that just takes it to an entirely different level. I wonder if, and, maybe you can share some insight from the book if it was articulated in there, but I wonder if him having that mentality was a way for him just to let all of those difficult feelings go so that it would free up his bandwidth to forgive and to move on and to have a good life, in spite of all that stuff happening.
I think so. Right. So yeah, obviously had he focused on the negative and the bad stuff and understanding that going down the route of resentment and bitterness gets you nowhere, right? That creates hell in your life and hell and everybody else around you in their lives as well. So that's just understanding that type of thinking leads to that type of situation, can hopefully prevent you from going down that road, right? Because you can make hell in your life. Right. So it's easy to do. It's really it's hard not to make your life into that, right? It's easy. So
yeah, it takes a large amount of intention and being purpose built.
Yes. For sure.
To stay away from that. Thanks for sharing that. I'm definitely going to look into those books. That's really powerful stuff. Now I'd like to get into some of the weeds of your physical training and performance.
Sure.
So you do CrossFit. Do you follow the workout of the day at your gym, or what do you do to prepare additionally for like the challenges you're getting ready to do?
Yeah, so I try to stay on that. I'm not smart enough to come up with my own workouts for CrossFit, so I always do whatever workout they're doing in the morning. So, which there's so much variety. So, but if there's something specific that I'm training for, like this 24-hour Murph thing this weekend, then I'm obviously going to tailor my training towards that. So for this, I've been training probably like 3 or 4 months. I kind of firmly committed in early March to do it. And by that, I mean, I told other people I was going to do it. So that kind of gets you on the hook for it, right? But so I've been trying to do more volume this year in terms of a lot more push-ups and squats. So I've been, for the past couple months, coming in early to the gym, before the 5:30 and doing like a pre-workout of just trying to get more volume in on push-up, squats. Pull-ups are hard because they tear up your hands. You can't do volume every single day on pull-ups because your hands are going to get destroyed. So, but push-ups and squats and running. So just a lot of that stuff.
Are you doing strict pull-ups or are you doing kipping?
Kipping, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, kipping definitely tear up your hands more.
And I grip it in a way that they're not sliding, so there's no friction, but just like it pinches on your calluses, right? So like over time, like after 800, 900 pull-ups, they're like, hey, we're done. Like, no, we're not done. Got to keep going. So suck it up, hands. But
you're extremely disciplined. What do you attribute that drive and determination to?
Oh, I'm just running scared my entire life. No, I'm running from stuff, right? Like seriously, like there's 2 great motivators in life. Avoidance of pain and chasing of pleasure. I don't care about pleasure. I'm just running away from pain. Like I'm reaffirming my self-identity at all times, right? So I see myself as a disciplined person, so I have to be a disciplined person because from my own perspective, that's what the ideal person is, if you will, right? So I've created, an image in my head of an ideal person. I said, okay, what are their characteristics? How am I going to emulate those traits? So I don't want to be. I don't have a choice because I've created this story in my head. Okay. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. I think I do that to some degree too.
No, I'm sure you do.
You competed in an adventure race with Jen a couple of years ago. What was that experience like, and what did you take away from it?
That was fun. That was my first one. I think that was Jen's second. So going back, I never told you the story about my first day of basic training, but my first day of basic training, I was in shape, and I grew up in New York, right? Mild temperature, come down to Georgia, first week of July. It was kind of toasty down there, right? So obviously first day, they're yelling at you, they're making you do stupid shit. But I was in shape. I wasn't like mentally weak or physically weak. But I got to a point where they were smoking us right at the beginning. And like I stood up, and then I collapsed. Like my legs just gave out. I'm like, what the hell is going on? This is weird, right? I never felt anything like that. So I was like kind of wobbly, and thankfully that was towards the end of that little smoking session. And then I can't remember what happened, but I could tell something was wrong with me. So, I'll never forget what I said, but I had to walk up to the freaking drill sergeant. Everybody else went to the chow hall for breakfast or lunch. I had to walk up to the drill sergeant and say, "Oh, excuse me, drill sergeant. I think I'm a heat casualty." I felt so stupid, right? I didn't know what else to say, but like I knew something was wrong. So it's just like, and of course the drill sergeant's looking at me like, "You're a pathetic piece of shit." But thankfully he gave me the benefit of the doubt. He said, "Go lay down over there on a bench." It was in the shade. So, but anyways, I started at a deficit in basic training because everybody thought I was a piece of shit because they just thought I was quitting and weak. But anyways, I was some type of, whether it was heat exhaustion or whatever, but there was something. And if you don't know, when you have a heat related injury, you're more susceptible to those in the future. Right. So they have plagued me throughout everything I've ever done. So I've got to be very, very cautious about overheating. I overheat extremely fast. I get cramps extremely fast. So, and that was going to tie into the story with Jen in that adventure race. So that was my first one. I think it was her second, but we're out there. We're riding our bikes, going to points. We're trying to squeeze in like one more point. We go down to this long dirt road. We get off our bikes, or she gets off her bike. She goes into the wood line to get a point, and I get off my bike and I get this horrible lockout cramp. I call it a lockout cramp. I'm not sure what it's called, but the feeling is the entire muscle hardens up like a rock, and like it's extremely difficult to bend your extremities. So like I fall on the ground and I'm like kind of withering around. She emerges from the wood line and points at me and starts laughing at me. It was the funniest damn thing. She's like, "You idiot, what are you doing?" I'm like, so of course I started laughing too, right? It was pretty funny, legitimately. But
she's told me that part of the story, but I think she just thought that you had, some type of trouble unclipping, and then turned over and she caught you at that moment. I'm not sure if she knew the backstory of like your heat injury.
It was a bad cramp. Yeah, it was a really bad cramp. So
wow. And so that's probably if she, thought that it was something serious, she probably wouldn't be laughing. But
it still would have been funny though, right? So you're pathetic, Shaun. Get up, come on. Suck it up, Buttercup, right?
Yeah, that seemed like she talked about that and how unprepared she was for the paddle portion.
Oh my God, that was terrible. And,
yeah, she said that kicked you guys' asses.
4 hours long, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I was just in support of that one. Yeah. Just a cheerleader standing, clapping my hands. I had recently had a hip replacement and I wasn't fully recovered from that. But if you guys do another one, I'm on board for it.
I definitely want to. So yeah, we got to figure something out for sure.
Definitely. So now I'd like to move on to Warrior WOD and the 24 hours of Murph challenge that you're getting ready to do this Memorial Day. What is Warrior WOD?
Okay, so I learned about this organization about 6 months ago. We were doing the annual 24-hour hero workout at another CrossFit gym, Red Point Athletics. And every year on Veterans Day, they do 24 hero WODs in 24 hours. So Phil Palmer, he's the founder of Warrior WOD. He came down and talked to us, and I'd never heard of it either. So he was explaining it, and I'm like, this is a great idea. So in a nutshell, the program is, well, let me give you Phil's backstory real fast. So Phil was a officer in the Marine Corps. So 2 strikes against him. No, I'm just kidding. Phil's a really good dude, actually. But he was having some PTS issues after he got out, and just kind of the normal symptoms that a lot of guys have.
Post-traumatic stress for those who don't know.
Thank you. Thank you. So he was having a lot of those issues, and he started going to a CrossFit gym, and after a couple months, like most of his symptoms had disappeared. So he had the light bulb moment. Hey, why don't I start an organization? This is obviously a more holistic approach to dealing with these type of things, to dealing with PTS. So why don't I start a charity, an organization to help fellow vets actually deal with this stuff? So in a nutshell, the program is vets get a 6-month gym membership paid for, and ideally CrossFit, but it doesn't really matter. It's kind of whatever is closest to them because it's all throughout the country, right? So a 6-month gym membership, then they get a nutritionist assigned to them, and they talk with the nutritionist at least every 2 weeks just to make sure that their eating is on track and whatnot. And then I think this is the most important part. They get linked up with a battle buddy / mentor. And again, this is really, from my perspective, the key part of this program, because that person is also a fellow vet and they can relate to that person better as opposed to like maybe a therapist who's got no military experience, right? And you're not acting in the role of a therapist, but you're there to listen to them, encourage them, hold them accountable, because obviously they're required to go to the gym X amount of times a week, and you got to check in with them constantly. Hey, how are your workouts today? Are you going to the gym? What did you do today? How's everything else going, right? So like you're constantly a presence in their life, checking in with them, seeing if they need anything, offering support, encouraging them, pushing them when they need a push. So that's a program. And they're trying to grow the program, obviously, as much as they can. And there's been a lot of growth in the past year. And I think they're up to 4 classes they're doing this year. So it's a great charity. If anybody can support it, please do, obviously, financially. If anybody's supported, or if anybody's interested in volunteering and becoming a mentor, there's an application on the website to do that. But it's really rewarding. You're helping out a lot of people. They're just 2 things that I'm passionate about: veterans and working out. So it's a perfect mix for me. So when I decided to do this again, this will be my 3rd time doing the 24 hours of Murph. It's been 5 years since the last time. When I decided to do it, I'll just do it on my own. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm just going to do it. But I said, okay, if I'm going to do it, I may as well do it for something. So I reached out to Erin. She actually goes to our gym, and she's the battle buddy coordinator for this charity. So like, hey, if you want to put something together, then I'm going to do it regardless. But if you want to put something together, then obviously I'll support it. So that's kind of how that link came to be.
That's incredible. I think I'll apply to be, a mentor as well. It sounds like a great program, and I wasn't aware of it before. I started doing the research on you for this, and it sounds like a great way, going back to the transition from the military, a great way to, be a part of community.
Yes.
And, to fill that need and to stay, in track with some like-minded people.
Yes, exactly.
What we've already talked about on Memorial Day at CrossFit Rayford, you're taking on an incredible challenge of strength and endurance to help raise funds, which will go directly to saving those veterans' lives. The Murph Hero WOD is very challenging on its own, much less what you're planning on doing with it. What does the Murph workout of the day consist of, and how have you included that into the challenge you're taking on?
So it's a mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, a mile run. So that's 1 round. So, I'm not doing a chipper version like that, and I'm definitely not wearing a vest because it just messes with your joints too much. So I'll break things down into different rounds in between those mile runs. The goal this year is 21 rounds. So I kind of look at it as, hey, this is a problem set. How am I going to solve this problem, right? So because 24 hours is not a lot of time if you're trying to do a lot of volume. So to me, the challenge is how much volume can I possibly do within that time frame following these loose parameters, right? And the parameters are what is one round. So there's all kinds of different things and ways. I've got obviously a strategy set up of how I'm going to break things down, but yeah. So I don't think people understand how much your body just shuts down after X amount of time doing something, right? So,
so yeah, if you can talk about some of your previous experiences, what your strategy was for those, as opposed to what your strategy is going to be for the 24 hours of Murph in 2024.
So the first time I did it in 2018, it went okay. I got 18 and a half rounds, but the goal was 20. So I had to do it again to get to 20 rounds, right? So, and obviously I kind of learned a lot about, I had a lot of lessons from 2018 that I applied to 2019. One thing I did was I brought a treadmill to the gym so I could run inside and not outside because it's hot here, and all your training takes place in winter and early spring, right? So it's like it's cooler out, and then it doesn't matter what year it is. If it's Memorial Day, it's going to be hot, right? So that's just how it is here. So, and like I said, having those past issues with heat exhaustion, like I need to regulate my internal body temperature. So stay inside for me, stay on a treadmill, don't go outside. And then, just learning how to break things down. When are you going to walk? When are you going to jog? What's the ratio between those two? When are you going to take breaks? How are you going to fuel? What is your breaks? Like I typically do, like Cindy is 5, 10, 15, 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15. That's like a typical thing people break down Murph with. I do 6, 18, 12. I do 6 pull-ups, 18 squats, 12 push-ups for 16 rounds. Then I sprinkle in the other 4, 8, 12 in between those 16 rounds. It just gets it done a little faster. One of the biggest two problems that I'm going to face, that I've always faced, are heat and hands. Your hands get tore up like we talked about. So how can I prevent going to that bar? I want to get on that bar as few times as possible, right? So there's different strategies for that, and I wrap some special tape around the bar to give me a little bit of cushion and padding. But yeah, so figuring that out and figuring out the heat are really important, and figuring out the breakdown of each round, and then adding in, after X amount of rounds, I'm going to increase my time to do a round, right? So like, because you're going to slow down. It's not like, I'll just do a round an hour. No, you're not. Like, no, you're not. So, right. Your body, you're going to get slower and slower and slower and slower. So you've got to factor that in, but you're on a clock, right? And it's not like, hey, I'm just going to do 10 rounds and spend 2 hours on each. It's no, I'm going to do 20 rounds and it's almost around an hour. So I've got to move the whole time, right? So that's the challenge.
Okay. Have you ever had anyone else that's attempted to do it with you?
So 2019, Bret, another guy at the gym, he left shortly thereafter, but he was like, fuck it, I'll do it. I'm like, all right, let's do it.
That's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
He showed up with a vest and I'm like, no. You don't want that. You've done no training. He's like, thank God. So he survived like 10 or 11 rounds and called it, but he did awesome for no training.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That was awesome.
He's a super tough guy too. Yeah,
tough guy, great athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was hilarious. But
what's your support system like?
Wife. My daughter will come and hang out, but like there's a lot of people are going to come from the gym, I'm sure. So it is starting on a Sunday, so there won't be that many people, but hopefully we get some people to come. I think they're doing like a potluck on Sunday night or something. I don't know. I'm not really paying attention to that. I'm not on social media, so I don't see anything. So
yeah, if anyone in the local area is interested, I'm sure you can go to CrossFit Rayford. Find them online. I'm sure they posted something there, something on Facebook.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please come by, say hi. I'll be miserable. So
yeah, will do. The workout was designed to honor Navy SEAL Lieutenant Michael Murphy. Can you tell us some about Michael's story and why it was so impactful?
Well, so obviously he was one of the main characters in the whole lone survivor deal that we all know about, or probably know about. But he was that SEAL commander on that mission that went terribly wrong, right? So, and he did some heroic things on that mission and ended up being awarded the Medal of Honor. But apparently he liked to do this workout with the running and the calisthenics. So, and that's how these hero workouts are created in honor of somebody who does CrossFit, and they typically are based off of what that person liked to do. So this is something that I think he liked to do. So it's become a massive tradition in the CrossFit community to do Murph on Memorial Day. Like all the gyms do it. So it's very popular to do. And that's why I decided to do it. Right. So I was like, hey, actually in 2017, I'm like, hey, let me try to do 10 rounds. So I did that. And then I had to up it the next year. And then, it turned into a thing. So here we are back again, 5 years older. So do I still have it? I don't know.
It's going to be 24 hours and it's going to be 48 hours.
Yeah, right. That sounds terrible.
Yeah. We've already discussed a lot your relationship with pain and suffering in general, and more specifically as it relates to endurance challenges of this nature. One question that I wanted to ask you was, do you find that a certain degree of struggle, of pain and suffering is necessary for you to feel accomplished?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I need it. Like I have to feel it. So there's like, why do you do this kind of stuff? I need the pain, but like there's two things that can happen during things like this. The first is, and it's really cool and it's hard to get here, you get into this almost flow state where just like energy level is high, everything feels good. You just kind of feel like a machine. Like everything is just, you're very present and there's nothing else. There's no other distractions, right? It's a very cool state to be in. Doesn't happen often, but I find it happens in things like this or very, very long workouts. The other thing is the complete and total opposite end of that. And that is you get broken down so much psychologically and mentally and physically during things like this. Like you become so vulnerable at some point, right? Just because you're so broken down. And it's like, I don't know how else to describe this, but it's like this huge release. Like, just like all the facade just kind of washes away and it's just you. It can be incredibly emotional, but like I've only experienced that when I'm like really broken down. And there's something about that is so enjoyable, or that like you're actually aiming for and that you actually look forward to. Is
it a dissolution of the ego to a certain extent?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. You're so broken down at so many levels, right? So yeah.
That's really interesting. I haven't really considered that, because I've done some endurance things throughout my life, but never to that level. And I guess I have experienced a degree of that, but what you're describing sounds like whenever I've heard about people doing ayahuasca journeys or something like that, down in South America, it's just a complete dissolution of their ego, and they it's more of a spiritual journey.
Yes, that's the right word, spiritual. Yeah, for sure.
That's incredible. And we'll finish this up soon. I want to be respectful of your time. I just have a few last questions here. What does Memorial Day mean to you personally?
So there's kind of, and specifically within the CrossFit community, everybody knows about hero workouts, right? And the common refrain is, we do these to honor the fallen. Okay. What does that mean? Like, what does it mean to honor the fallen? When you actually kind of dig into that, what does that mean? And my take on that is, that person is dead. They're not alive anymore. They don't have the opportunity at life anymore. It's gone, right? So how do you honor them? Well, you do that by living your life to your full potential as best as you possibly can, right? You honor them by honoring yourself, right? So my take on Memorial Day is that strong reminder to do that. And that's something that you can do every single day. Anybody can do. You don't need Memorial Day. It's helpful to have that reminder, but you're still alive. So what are you doing? What are you doing with your life, right? Make the best of it. Be the best version of yourself. So that's how I take it.
That's great perspective, and that's probably the best way that you can honor those who have sacrificed so much for our way of life and our freedom.
I think so, yeah.
With Memorial Day approaching, are there any specific veterans who've paid the ultimate sacrifice with whom you've had a personal relationship, and would you be willing to share some of your memories of them?
Nobody really close to me. I was very fortunate in that nobody close to me died. I knew a lot of guys, but nobody close to me. So, yeah.
You can, count yourself very fortunate for.
Yeah, I'm beyond blessed
sure.
and beyond fortunate. And we did stuff. So many people did so much more than I did. So it's hard to even, I don't even want to talk about it, but we did stuff, but again, I was always very fortunate and very blessed to come out of those experiences relatively unscathed. So very, very, very fortunate, very, very blessed.
And the last thing, where can people find you online or go online to support your cause?
warriorwad.org. I think I'm not exactly sure the link, but again, I'm not on social media, so.
I just
but that's the website. I know there's a specific link to the actual event page, but I'm not sure what that is. So.
Yeah, it's warriorwad.org/event/24-H.
Thank you, because I'm pretty much useless with that stuff. So
no worries.
I'm just here to work out, man. That's it, buddy.
Well, Shaun, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We've had a great discussion.
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate you being here. I really look up to you and admire you. And
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.